Hey guys, welcome back to another Woodbrew video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about all the joinery we used in the bed build last week. And this video is basically just going to go over how exactly we did these corner joints and also cut our dados for our center dividers. Now that bed is essentially just a whole bunch of these boxes. Some are bigger, some are smaller, but this video is going to show you exactly how to cut this joinery. It's extremely simple. I promise you, even if you're a brand new to woodworking DIYer, you can cut these joints. I'm going to show you how to do it really easily today. So without further ado, let's get started. So we're going to start by making this joint here, which is all the corner joints in the entire build. This is actually from my notes whenever we were getting started with this build, just to visualize things. So our side pieces come up, they have this piece here, and then this section is cut out. And then our top pieces come across, and this section is cut out. And they basically just sort of half lap over one another and create this interesting but really strong joint. So we're going to start with this one at the table saw. In order for us to make this process safe and easy, we need to create this little jig, and it is extremely easy to make. All it is a board. This is a random length. This one is 14 inches by 12 inches. And then it has a piece that goes over the fence of our table saw. So all we have to do is find the width of the table saw fence, cut this piece, set it on top, set this one here, and another piece here, and just glue and screw those together. And you want there to be no play, but you still want it to be able to move nice and freely. This is going to allow us to clamp our boards vertically in place so that when we push this through the table saw blade, it's supported, our hands are out of the way, and the cut is nice and square. So you want to start by making yourself one of these jigs. For this example, we're going to be joining these two pieces of plywood together, and the first thing we need to do is figure out the exact half of the width of our board, because 3/4 inch plywood is not actually 3/4 of an inch, and even between brands this will vary. So having a quality set of calipers or something along those lines will make this process a lot easier. But if you want to just do some guesswork, you can do that as well, and you might just have to make a few extra test cuts. But these are really inexpensive, and I'll leave a link in the description below where you can find a set, because this makes this process and a lot of other things in woodworking a lot easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure the thickness of our board, and it is 0.721, which I believe half of that is 0.3605. So what we're going to do is we're now going to take 0.3605 and set that on our calipers. So with our calipers locked using this little lock knob, we can now double check that that is right by simply scribing a line this way and scribing a line this way, and the line should be exactly on top of one another. That's how you know you've got it perfectly in the center. And then from there, all we need to do is we need to set our fence up so that we are cutting the correct width on this first pass. So in order to make this process easier, I'm just going to set my calipers up right on the edge of this blade here. And we actually need to take into account the width of the blade, and that's why I'm measuring from the outside of the blade. If you didn't know, on calipers they have this little piece that sticks out here. That's the exact same measurement as these two up here. So I'll put that there, and then I'm going to move my fence over with our jig in place, and I'm just going to touch the edge of that. So I'll keep playing with it until it's just right. And there we go. So that is going to be the exact half of the board is going to be cut out whenever we run our board through this way. In addition to setting the width, we also need to set the height of the blade. So this is a 3/8 inch setup block. These setup blocks are really handy to have around the shop. This is close enough to the measurement that we have. So I'm just going to set this right here, and I'm going to lower my blade down until we're exactly at that mark. Now keep in mind that your teeth sometimes are alternating, so make sure you're picking the highest tooth here. Make sure your table saw is unplugged, and then we're also going to rock the blade back and forth so that we can find the high spot of that tooth. And once we get it just right, I'm actually going to go right below the 3/8 inch mark, just because I know that we're a little under 3/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to lock the blade in place right there. It's time to make our first test cut. And like I said, this is a test cut, so you want to use scraps before you actually use this on your project. And I'm just going to place this against our wall here. And if you were making this connection this way, of course you would do it like this, but you want the side that you're actually cutting the joint in facing down. I guess that's pretty obvious, but then we're going to take a clamp and we're going to clamp this here. This isn't 100% necessary, but it keeps your hands free and make sure that board stays nice and vertical. And then we're going to turn the saw on and just run this all the way through. Make sure that once it's all the way through the blade, that you don't pull this jig back towards you. That could result in this being slung back at you. So make sure you push it through, turn the table saw off, and then undo this clamp and take the board away. Now we're just going to repeat the same process for the other board, and things to keep in mind are which side you're actually facing against this. So whichever side is against this board here is going to be the inside of the box. Whichever side is the outside will be the outside of the box. So this is what we're left with after that first cut. Now we're going to come in here and cut this piece across to remove this section. And so we don't actually have to make any changes to the table saw. We're just going to flip this board over and set it here and run it through the saw just like this. To make this process a little bit easier and safer, you can use one of these miter gauges here. And this will just kind of help you keep it square. I've been able to do this without using this and using it, so if you don't have one, it's not the end of the world. You just want to be careful if you're not using one. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to simply run this through. The thing to keep in mind is that you want the smallest section here down. So we don't want to cut into our other side. We want to cut out just this smaller section here. If you look closely, there's this little bitty piece right here that's left over, and that's just because the blade wasn't quite high enough. So now we can fine tune that. We'll raise the blade up just a little bit, run this back through until this goes away. So just raising that blade up just a little bit got rid of that piece on the inside. So now let's test and see how this fits. And it's pretty good, but you can see that there is the slightest gap right here. And anytime we have a gap, I'm exaggerating now, but a gap here, or there's a lip on this side like we have. I mean, it's a 32nd of an inch, but we can actually get rid of that, which will help make things even squarer and nicer. So what we're going to do is this gap means that our cut width is too much. So we actually need to decrease the gap we have here between the edge of our blade and the edge of our fence. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my table saw here. I'm going to bump it over the most fraction of an inch. That may even just be like a 64th of an inch. I'm just going to bump it over a little bit, and then we'll flip these boards around and try again. If whenever you cut this the first time you had this piece being too short to this outside edge, that would mean the opposite of my problem. That would mean that your fence actually needs to move over away from the blade more to increase the width of this cut. But just know that whatever this gap is here, like this is probably a 64th of an inch, that gap is actually divided in half because we're cutting in half. So this is actually an error of around like a 32nd of an inch. So it just takes a micro adjustment of the fence in order to fix this tiny little gap right there. So we've got our new sides cut. I also marked our old sides so we don't get them confused with one another. And let's try this out. Let's go right here. Yeah, so that's looking much, much better. You will notice that there's a bit of a gap here, but that's due to some chip out here. If you look down the side, it's actually nice and tight here. And even with the bottom, this is kind of the joint we're looking at. Like, how tight is this and the side edge? And if whenever they're pressed together, are they square? Because that means that the joint is done correctly. And yes, that is extremely square. So that is how you cut that joint. Now all you need to do, add a little bit of glue and either some pin nails or even some dowels to reinforce the joint. But pin nails and glue will make an extremely strong joint with that. So I hope you found that useful. We're going to move on to how we cut the dados. So now we're going to talk about how exactly I cut these undersized dados for plywood. Because again, like we said, plywood isn't actually 3/4 of an inch thick. So if we used a 3/4 inch router bit, this wouldn't work. So you could either do it on the table saw or use this really simple router jig and an undersized router bit to make this happen extremely easily and make for a really clean result. So why you would use this, it just reinforces a normal butt joint. So typically, as you've seen us do in our projects, we would just stick our board here. Let's assume this is a shelf and this is the side, and we would have just drilled holes through here. But by creating this dado and setting our shelf in this dado, it creates an extremely strong joint. It also helps with alignment. It looks a lot better and it doesn't take that much time. So let's get this jig right here made, and then we'll move over to the router and I'll show you exactly how to cut this. So this is literally the simplest jig you could possibly make. I have some random scraps at random widths and lengths here, and all I've done is I've set my square along this bottom one. I've made sure that this piece is square and I screwed it in place. I also added a little bit of glue so that it would stay there, a little bit of CA glue, and that's it. That's all we've done. We've just made an L that is square. In order to do this really easily, we're gonna use one bit. This is the Undersized Plywood Dado bit. This actually comes in a set, part number 470 from Whiteside Bits, but we actually got ours from Bits&Bits, and this has this astro coating on it. So you can see it's like this really darker color. This is going to make this bit last twice as long, and these bits aren't cheap, so having that coating on there for a few extra bucks really goes a long way. So I'll leave a link in the description where you can find the set, because the set actually comes with a 1/2 inch plywood and 1/4 inch plywood set, so you can basically do any type of dado you need with just these 3 bits. Now what's great about this, like I said, is this is the width of standard 3/4 inch plywood, and we'll make our joints nice and tight. So this is the bit we're going to be using, and again, links in the description below. Bits&Bits is a big supporter of our channel. We have a coupon code. It's Woodbrew15, gets you 15% off. Really love those guys and make a great quality product and highly recommended. So we're going to be using a router that has a plunge base. This one also has kind of like a flat side on it, which will be slightly useful. But if you don't have a router with a plunge base, you can use one with a fixed base. It will work just as well. The benefit of having a plunge router is that you can start and stop the dado with inside of the board, and that is really useful if you don't want the dado to come all the way out the front or back. For us, that's not really the case, so we could actually use the other one. We picked this router up actually the other day and really like it, so I'll leave a link in the description below. If you're brand new to woodworking and you're terrified of routers, or you've been in woodworking and you just haven't explored the world of routers, I highly, highly recommend taking some time to start trying to learn how to use one, pick one up. I'll leave a link in the description below to Jonathan Katz-Moses' video that talks all about routers. He does an outstanding job talking about everything you need to know. I promise you they're not nearly as intimidating as you think, and once you get the hang of it, you can do so many cool things with a router. So we're going to be using this plunge-based router, and now I'll talk about the jig on exactly how we can use these two in combination to cut our dados. So the way this jig works is you're going to make a line across your board where you want your dado. You also want to make sure that there's a line on the end closest to you as well, and you want to line your jig up to that center point. Now you could make both lines to show where your dado wants to be, and you could use these outside edges. I prefer the center line method. It's just a little bit easier to mark out. And when you first make the jig, this area here won't be cut, but as soon as you use this for the first time, this router bit will cut that groove in there for you, and then you'll know exactly where to line this jig up for every other one. So the first time you do it, you want to use a scrap, and you want to lower your router bit and cut through the jig, and then you'll have this mark, and you can align it on every other board. And all we're going to do is we're going to get our board lined up. We're going to clamp this down to the workbench, clamp this piece down. We're going to lower our router bit to our desired depth. For us, that's 1/4 inch. And we're just going to push that across this fence and then stop it at the other side. It's going to be that easy to cut these out. They're going to come out super crisp and clean. And this is really repeatable and super quick to set up once you have this jig made. In order to set up your router to do this correctly, what you want to do is you want to lower the plunge base. If you don't have a plunge base, then you'll just flip the router over and do the same step and lock it in place. So we're going to go all the way down to our board. I'm going to lock it in place. There's a little thumb tab here. This unlocks and locks. And then once we have it sitting on our piece, we can actually come over here to our pin here. This is what's going to be our adjustable height pin. This is what sets the height of these little guides here. So we're going to lock this in place. And now if we release it and come back up and went down to that stop block, then we'd be right at the level of our plywood. But what's cool about these plunge routers is this piece rotates in quarter inch increments. So if I go here and I go all the way down, let me flip it up so you can see, we're actually going to be exactly 1/4 inch out of the bottom of our router. And that's what we're going to set our router depth to in order to create these dados. Now, if you want to be more precise, a simple way to do that is to grab one of these setup blocks again. You're going to go down until you touch the plywood, stop it. You're going to pick a random one of your stop blocks here. You're going to add whatever the exact width of the thing is that you want. Then lock this in place. Remove this, and again, now if we press down, it's going to be the exact height of that piece. It's a super simple way to get your router set up. We're going to set ours up for 1/4 inch pass and cut these dados. We've got our jig clamped down to our workbench, and I'm just going to slide my piece under there. If you keep some slight pressure on it, it'll actually sort of lock your piece in for you. And then I'm going to align that with my center line back here. Then I'm gonna clamp this down nice and tight, and I'm gonna follow that up with a clamp on this side as well, just to make sure that this doesn't move whenever we're cutting this. Now what I'll do is I'll plunge the router to 1/4 inch. I'm gonna move it straight across this board just like that. So I've got the piece cut out. We're going to test the fit now. And it's nice and tight. That's exactly what you want in a dado. This is a great way to add a lot of strength to a project. It doesn't take that much more time, and I prefer doing it with a router versus a dado stack or anything like that, just because it's so clean and easy to repeat. It just looks great and works pretty much every single time. And also you can just see how secure this really is. Even without any glue or fasteners, it is an extremely strong, secure joint, which is what you want in a dado. But it's also what you want when you're surfing the internet. And that's where today's sponsor, Surfshark, comes in. I've laid out a diagram to show you exactly why it's important that you consider getting a VPN and protecting your data. This is the way your internet probably currently works. This is an oversimplified version, but essentially, you type something into your computer, your information, this guy, leaves your computer, it heads to your local network or your router or the public Wi-Fi or the cafe or whatever you're at, it then exits, it heads into the internet, it is directed to the server of the website that you requested information from. That then sends information back all the way to computer. Now there's a major flaw with this. Basically, the bad guys can come in and they can vacuum your information up anywhere in here. Essentially, they can tap into that and get your information. It could be bad stuff like credit card information, or it could be simple stuff like your IP address, which gives them the exact location of where you're at, your tracking for the purchases you make. Basically, people take a lot of your information from this area, they sell it online, and or they steal your information and use it themselves. And this is where a VPN can come in and help you out. So when you have a VPN, it then works like this. Your information travels from your computer, but when it gets into the danger zone, it passes through these secure tunnels before it actually goes out to the server and comes back to you. A VPN will encrypt your information. It will also allow you to browse from anywhere in the world. So when your IP address comes out here, it first goes here before going here, meaning that your IP address or your location can be entirely different than where you currently actually are. Now that information, like I said, is also encrypted, which means that if anyone tries to take this information, they won't be able to understand it, therefore making it much safer to browse the internet, especially in areas like public cafes and different things like that. You never want to do any banking in areas like that. With a VPN, you'll have some extra protection. So let me show you what that looks like in real life. If I go to Netflix and I search for a show that I'm currently watching called Doctor Who, it's not going to show up because it's not available in the US, but I can browse from anywhere with a VPN. So I'm going to go to the Surfshark app and I can click locations and I can click anywhere in the world. I've been recently browsing from the UK, so I'll click UK London. It will connect in just a second. And now that we are connected to the UK London server, we are actually browsing the internet from the UK. So if I go back here into Netflix and I search Doctor Who, it is right here. And that's because we are now searching from a different part of the world, and that is what's so cool about a VPN, and that shows you exactly kind of the way it works in real life. So I've been a paying member of Surfshark for several years now. It's a product that I really believe in and I've used for a long time, and if you guys would like to check it out, you can use the coupon code Woodbrew or use the link in the description below. You get 85% off and 3 months for free. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you really pretty much have nothing to lose if you want to try it out. I highly recommend it. It's a great thing to maybe give as a Christmas gift. A Christmas gift? It could be a great thing to give to someone as a Christmas gift or anything like that. It's a super great product. Again, I highly recommend it, and thanks Surfshark for supporting our channel. And that's gonna do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this video, please let us know down in the comment section below, and we'll do some more of these in between projects, giving you a closer look to exactly how we're putting these projects together. Thanks for sticking around to the end. I greatly appreciate it, and we will see you in the next video.